Okay, this is Pete back with another rant, and today I'm talking about the failure of Concord, the new PlayStation 5 game, and why that's a good thing, or why I think it's a good thing. So I am incredibly happy that this has happened with Concord, and I don't normally wish for games to fail. It's a pretty horrible thing because I suppose at the end of the day there's going to be people somewhere who lose their jobs. That's not cool, so I'm not happy with that side of it, but sometimes I think companies need a harsh lesson just to show them that they're doing the wrong thing. Like they're really badly going in the wrong direction. And I mean, with this Concord game, the red flags were all there. Like when they first unveiled it, nobody was excited for it. Very few people were excited for it. I thought it looked dreadful. It was enough to put me off continuing to support PlayStation. Like essentially, I traded my PlayStation in for an Xbox, partly because of Concord and partly because the Xbox games looked a lot better. But the Concord thing is so misjudged, and I mean I have to be honest. We're all jumping a gun a little bit because a lot of sites, a lot of YouTubers are running with Concord's been cancelled. Concord's been cancelled. Now it's true in a way, but that's not the whole truth. The exact wording that they use, and these are the people who made it, said that they were removing it from the store, removing it from sale, refunding the people who bought it, and then they said some wording that said we're going to try and find a more effective way to reach the players. So what it says to me is that PlayStation haven't really given up on Concord completely. I feel that what they will do is it will return at some point, probably as either a free-to-play game or maybe as part of PlayStation Plus. So I find it very difficult to believe they would just completely chuck the whole thing in the bin and completely say no more, no more. But having said that, it has done staggeringly terrible. I mean, worse than even I expected, to be honest with you. I mean, I thought the game was going to bomb. I thought it looked terrible. But I thought about that games before and they still found their audience. I personally don't like live service games. I mean, live service games have their place, right? Absolutely, like any game does. I'm not here to say, well, just because I don't like it, it shouldn't exist. But what I mean is, this relentless push that Sony's had to suddenly make everything live service doesn't make any sense because there were so many live service games already out there. And they already have their own live service game that does very well, which is obviously Destiny and Destiny 2, which has done really well. But even Destiny wasn't a sure thing for a while. Like, when Destiny first launched, it had loads and loads of players, and then for a long time it was losing players a lot, and it was struggling, and there was a lot of criticism of Destiny in the early days that seems to have been forgotten about now because it is such a success, but it wasn't a sure thing for a while with Destiny. In those first few weeks, first months, I'd say, first few months before some of the expansions launched and things got a bit better, the game was actually struggling quite a bit to retain its players. A lot of players were dropping off. So Destiny turned it around, but with a lot of help, and they didn't have as much to compete with. In 2013, when Destiny launched, there wasn't a lot of other live service type games like it. That's one reason why I think it did so well. And I gave up Destiny after a certain amount of time. For me, it was a looter shooter, and I prefer games that are more story based. The story in Destiny wasn't very good, even though the lore and the world was interesting. The actual story of the game was pretty poor. And I always tend to go back to Destiny at some point. I always sort of felt that there were some decisions they made in that game I didn't like, particularly around raids and things like that I thought was just being obtuse for obtuseness' sake and not being particularly player friendly. So I decided not to continue to support Destiny after a while. So anyway, but I do have a soft spot for Destiny in a way. The game did play great, and it was at the time something that was quite new. But the amount of live service games we've had since, we've had Fortnite was a big hit. Obviously, all these MMOs, like Final Fantasy 14, like your Elder Scrolls, that have been around for years and years, and really, really well. World of Warcraft, really, really good. I have a lot of respect for those games to be able to stick around and stick at it. And that's the thing is like, you have to evolve the concept. You have to keep working on it. You have to keep plugging away at a live service for it to work. And it's got to start off from a place where people want to play it. Like Elder Scrolls, people wanted to play an online version of that. People wanted to play an online version of Final Fantasy 14. There was demand for that product to be good. Like when Final Fantasy 14 first launched, historically it was dreadful. It was like it was a broken game. It didn't work. It took a long time. In fact, they re-released it in a state that actually was functional, and then it built from there. So even that had its problems at start, but there was a demand to play Final Fantasy Online. I don't know where PlayStation's head was at with this game, what they saw in it, in like the early versions of it when they bought the studio that were making it. I have no idea what was going on because there's nothing about Concord that looks unique, remarkable, interesting, different. It's just generic by the numbers, Guardians of the Galaxy. The characters aren't memorable, don't look interesting. There's such a bland, vanilla game. And if there was anything that PlayStation wasn't back in the day, it was bland and vanilla. Like, PlayStation used to be the sort of the rebel that was on the scene when it first came in, and like making sort of edgy games, making games more for adults, making all these really cool, hard-hitting games, a little bit darker tone to them. And they were like they were taking risks at first PlayStation 1, massive risks that almost always paid off. With all of those PlayStation franchises, and a lot of those from PlayStation 1 are still very beloved now. Stuff like Crash Bandicoot, stuff like Ridge Racer, stuff like Gran Turismo, stuff like Resident Evil, stuff like Tekken. Like, all of those franchises are still going in iterations now, like 20 years later. Is Concord going to still be going in 20 years? It's not even going to be going in 2 weeks. It has been. The server's been shut down because there were so few people playing it. People couldn't even matchmake to play the game, so the game was just not in a good state. Didn't sell well. Less than 25,000 copies worldwide, which was dreadful. We didn't have good players on Steam. Obviously didn't have that much on PlayStation. And this is coming after another flop they had with Suicide Squad Kill the Justice League that was considered to be a huge fail and a miss for Warner Brothers as well. But that still managed better numbers than Concord. So it's like, this trend is definitely going down. In January, Suicide Squad was heavily criticised for launching to low play counts, not a lot of people playing it, not a lot of people excited, but it's still a lot more, substantially more, than who was playing Concord. And again, with Suicide Squad Kill the Justice League, it's not done what they wanted, and it's lost Warner Bros. A lot of money, but they're still committed to the roadmap they originally set out on. They're still making some content for it, because I think there is a desire there to play a Suicide Squad game that's good, and the game is quite fun. It's quite fun in small bursts. The story isn't very good, and it is not a good successor to the Arkham games on reflection. When I first played it, I really enjoyed it, but the enjoyment wears off pretty thin when the gameplay is so shallow. It's kind of the same objectives over and over repeated. There's nothing different, and this is what I don't like about live service games. It's just this constant treadmill of doing the same activity over and over and over again, and it just becomes monotonous and a bit pointless, if I'm honest. So Suicide Squad, yeah, I mean, I was playing it really just for the story, and at some point when all the content launches, I might go back and just play the story in it, and that's it. Because I did like the story aspect, I did like the characters, I love DC, so there were aspects of that game that were good, and aspects of it that I think people wanted it to be good, but it just wasn't that great. But this is even worse. There's nothing discernibly interesting about it. It doesn't have a cool hook, it doesn't have a cool universe. And not that every single thing has to be like a part of a big franchise, right? But a game like Star Wars Outlaws, which is sort of a mediocre game, if we're honest, it's fine, it's okay. But it's boosted a bit because it's set in a Star Wars world. It's boosted a bit because it feels like you're playing this in a Star Wars universe, and that gives it a little bit more to it than if it was just not a Star Wars game, but just a generic random space game. So even that has something more to it. But because Concord game was such a massive like fart in the wind, like when it was first unveiled, like nobody thought it looked good. I thought it looked absolutely dreadful, and even the trailer for it missed all what sort of game it was. Like, I think if it had been more in line with a Destiny type thing, where yeah, it was live service, but you at least went on a journey, you went to different planets, or whatever it could have been, like a Guardians of the Galaxy type adventure would have been better. But it was just a looter shooter. It feels like such a small little thing. It feels like the kind of game that you'd see on Switch for free or for £2 or something, or it just doesn't look quality. It doesn't look like, apart from the cutscenes, but the game itself, there's nothing remarkable about it. And people who've played it, I've never played it, I don't intend to ever play it, and I probably can't play it now. Say it was all right, but a lot of early game journalists, you could tell they were trying to jump on the Concord bandwagon and trying to pump it up and say it was good and say it was worth checking out. It didn't move the needle. Like, it didn't look good enough. And even those people who were trying to be super positive about it were still like, it's good, it's really good. There's a few problems, but it's really good. It's like, well, you're just trying to convince yourself it's good. Is it good enough? No. And I think that's been the same old song this whole generation of gaming. That's why I think this generation of gaming is probably the worst we've ever had, because there's just been nothing that's remarkable. And this is the least remarkable thing that's come out. It's like things seem to be getting worse rather than better. I think a couple of years ago, we had Spider-Man 2 come out. That looked awesome. We had Final Fantasy Rebirth come out. That looked good. Final Fantasy 16. So we had a few games on the horizon, and none of them were really amazing games. They were good, sometimes very good, but nothing that I would say was a system seller. Like, I love Final Fantasy Rebirth, but they did have some problems, and I don't think it's a kind of game that will sell PlayStation 5s, because it just wasn't. I don't think it's that kind of a game. That's just a brilliant, like, blow the doors off, amazing game that people are going to remember the next number of years. It's a very, very good game, but not good enough. Not as good as the original Final Fantasy VII. When that came out on PlayStation 1, put it like that. So there's just a lack of this, and I think because it's so difficult for games to make money now, no one's taking risks anymore. Because we're not taking risks anymore, we're getting these really middle of the road games, even compared to what we got last generation with PlayStation 4 and like Xbox One. Like, even compared to that, like, I think back to those games, and there were much better, daring, different games coming out then. Stuff like Detroit Human, was it Detroit Real Human, Quantic Dream, like all the Quantic Dream stuff I think is brilliant. There's a lot of cool stuff in PlayStation 4 that came out. Everyone's Gone to the Rapture, I like that as well. Like, there was a lot of different little games that were quite interesting alongside the big AAA games that were mainly pretty good. Some of them launched broken, some of them got better, some of them never did. But this generation, it's just felt like there's just been nothing. It seemed to be going somewhere, and now it's just fallen off the map. And I don't see it getting any better. I don't see the roadmap for PlayStation 5 improving. Yeah, we got Astrobot come out, but it's not enough for me to be excited about a game that's just essentially a game that Amelia would like to play, but maybe only for about 8 hours or something. I don't see it being like a 50+ hour long game, or a game that's that good it really would again sell PlayStation 5 back to me. And now they're forging ahead with PlayStation 6. There's always rumours about that, or PlayStation 5 Pro. And I just don't know who will buy it. Like, who's going to buy PlayStation 5 Pro? For what? What game is there to say I need a PlayStation 5 Pro? You haven't even got a game that champions a PlayStation 5. I mean, PlayStation 6, the one thing I will say is you do have whatever Naughty Dog's working on, which sounds good. We do have that, obviously, the game that Hideo Kojima's talked about that's after Death Stranding 2. Death Stranding 2 also doesn't look good enough, really, to be honest. Doesn't look like a system seller to me either. As I've said before, I'm not a big fan of that franchise. I love Hideo Kojima, but it's just something with that. It hasn't hit with me. I can't see myself bothering to go back and play it, really. It certainly didn't intrigue me enough to go, oh, Death Stranding 2's come out, so I better finish Death Stranding 1. I just saw the trailer of Death Stranding 2 and I was just like, again, like more of the same, like walking across, carrying things. It's just like, I'm going on a bit of a rant about Death Stranding here, but I'm like, I know we want to have new experiences, new games, Hideo Kojima. I know he's really good at creating new things, but new things aren't always that interesting. And in the case of Death Stranding, after a very short time, it's almost like Death Stranding would have been fine if it was a 4-hour long indie game. Like if it was just 3 or 4 hours long, and it was that concept, but just done over 3 or 4 hours with a very tight knit story, could have been actually really good. Like, I honestly think if it was about 4 or maybe even 8 hours long maximum, the same sort of tone, the same kind of story, the same kind of quality, but really super short. A bit like what the first Metal Gear Solid was, really super short. Because if you expanded Metal Gear Solid 1, a game that I love, out to like 50, 60, 80 hours, it would be rubbish. It would be boring. You'd be getting really bored of like choke holding guards, hiding away from guards, like, hiding from security cameras. Like, the same game loop wouldn't sustain it. Metal Gear Solid 1 was a brilliant example of it evolved the gameplay and was just the right length, and it added new elements all the time, and it kept it fresh, kept it interesting. There were no 2 rooms in that game that were actually the same. Every single new area you go to, there's something different to the previous area, and it carries on with that up in the ante until the game finishes. And that's why I think Metal Gear 1 for me is overall still the best Metal Gear game, even if Metal Gear 3 in a lot of ways it's got the edge on it in terms of certain things, but Metal Gear 1 has that perfect pace. I just think it was brilliant, and unfortunately, Hideo Kojima's sort of lost that, and now he's making games that are extremely, extremely long, that don't need to be as long as the gameplay loop they are. And I suppose part of it is people like the aspect of being able to create your own structures and put them on the world, and then being out there and people interact with them, which is cool in a way, and I suppose it's different, but it's not something that I really care about. like, I'll be honest, it's not my kind of thing. I care about a really well structured, decent story. I don't care that, like, well, I put a flag down here and it's had all these likes, or I create this structure. It doesn't, unless there's some story reason for it, it doesn't really intrigue me, you know. So I just think Death Stranding was a game that should have been way, way shorter, much more focused, and not just that same gameplay repeating over and over and over again, and just got bored of it. And so I don't have any interest in really playing a sequel. And the story was interesting, but then just too drawn out, like so drawn out that I was bored. Like, I definitely will watch the Death Stranding movie, because I feel that over the pace of the movie, over a couple of hours, you could get everything you needed from that. And I like some of the concepts, I like some of the ideas. And in a 2-hour movie, I think you could do it really, really well. And I'm so excited for the Death Stranding movie, but I feel that I don't need the game. I feel like the game is unimportant. It just feels like an overly indulgent game. It doesn't really need to be that long, or need to be, you know, I've got be selective about what I play these days, and I'm not playing it all the way through to the end. So anyway, I've gone off about Death Stranding, but it was a big disappointment for me in PlayStation 4. I was really looking forward to that game. It was one of the most hyped games that whole generation I was looking forward to, and it's ended up being a bit of a wet fart for me. So yeah, I don't know what PlayStation will do now. I'm hoping, this is my hope, that they will sort of turn things around and go back to making single-player games, because it seemed like that's kind of what was going to happen. Like, Naughty Dog already turned around and cancelled their Last of Us Online multiplayer game and said basically that they're going to focus on single player games. And I hope everybody else listens, because that is what PlayStation was built on. That is what people like PlayStation 4. And that doesn't mean you can't play live service games. Obviously, Destiny is a good example, but it's not a platform people come to running out for live service. People who love live service games already have it on the phone. They already have their Fortnite. They already have the games that they play with their mates, and they play them for free. And they're not going to drop a game that they play for free, that they played for years, they've spent lots of time in, to a brand new game that you've got to pay money for, that hardly anybody's playing, that doesn't look very good. It just doesn't make any sense to do that. So that doesn't mean that no live service ever in the future couldn't work. But my instinct is, if the Suicide Squad game didn't do enough, a game like that, that's DC, that people were for a while anticipating, that has well-known characters, you know, part of the Arkhamverse, if that couldn't do enough, and this Concord game bombed, I just don't see live service being the thing, you know, the magic ticket that Sony seem to think it is. And I really think it's akin to the stupid decisions that Xbox made last gen with the Xbox TV stuff. Like, I don't know where or who suggested this was the way to go from a leadership point of view, but they should be fired immediately and never allowed to do anything video games again, whoever it was, because it's to be honest, it's an embarrassing failure. I can't remember a game that's done this badly this soon, that has then been discontinued this soon. Like, there isn't one in my memory, a live service game or anything else, that within 2 weeks of release has just been, I think the only thing that came close was Cyberpunk 2077, where they removed it from the PlayStation Store. But even that wasn't removed for forever. It wasn't removed everywhere. Like, you could still buy the game physically. You know, you could still buy it on different platforms. It was just Sony decided to remove it from the PlayStation Store until it was in a better state, which was a good move. But that's still nothing like this. Cyberpunk still sold absolutely shitloads of copies day one. It was a huge selling game. It did loads and loads. Yes, they got a lot of backlash straight away. Yes, the sales then immediately tanked and went down, and it didn't do as much as they wanted overall. Now it's slowly creeping back up there, because they've put the time in to make it good, and they've put the time into fixing it. So I do want to check out Cyberpunk at some point. Still not done it. But, like, now it's a good game, and it took them a long time to get there. But even with Cyberpunk, it's not the same, because that still did good sales. It still did something at first before people realised how badly broken it was. And this has just done nothing. This has just, like, come out. Nobody's played it. No one wants to buy it. No one wants it. But I don't understand why they thought people would want it. Like, what is there about this idea in this game that looked so good to them that they were so sure that it was going to be a huge success? I also think the same with Suicide Squad game. Like, what were they thinking that was going to be $1 billion selling game? I really don't know what is going on with the AAA gaming companies these days. They don't seem to have a clue anymore. And it's like, very recent, they seem to, like, just the other year, we were touting that was the best year we've ever had for video games forever. Like, I didn't personally feel it was that good. To me, it was like a regular year for video games. But a lot of magazines running with the idea of like 2023 that we just had was like the greatest year ever for games. So how can we go from that to this within a year? I don't know. But that's all I'm going to say on it right now. I am happy because I do hope that it signals a change in PlayStation, going back to what they're good at. And if they do go back to what they're good at, I might consider jumping back on board with PlayStation 6, but I equally might not, because I do feel at this point Sony just don't know what the heck they're doing, and they're not announcing anything, they're not talking to anybody about what they're doing. So until I've got some clear sign that we've got a good, serious, decent amount of games, like I think for PlayStation 6, what they'd need to do to get me back as a fan is literally do a similar thing to the PS4 reveal, where it's got to come out of the gate and be bang after bang after bang of good looking games, interesting stuff, and just completely floor me in order to get me back. If it's just going to come out and it's like, here's a new Grand Theft Auto 20 with even better graphics, like that's not enough of a hook. This whole thing about better graphics is just not a hook anymore. It's not enough. It's like, oh, well, you can see the blades of grass in 4K. It's like, no, we need decent new IPs and new gaming experiences to really drive it forward. It's no good just reverting to the same, although doesn't it look a bit prettier than PlayStation 5? If that's what they're going to do, the PlayStation 5 Pro and with this PlayStation 6, it's just going to die. I think PlayStation might actually just die if they do that, because no one is going to, you know, half the people that have PlayStation 4 have now got PlayStation 5. So it's going to go down again. You're going to get half of the people who are PlayStation 5 jumping onto PlayStation 6. So again, you're going to get this unsustainable model. Your exclusivity of games won't be exclusive anymore because there's not enough people playing the system to keep it exclusive for you to make a profit. So all of a sudden it'll go multi-platform. Similar to what's happening to Xbox right now. They're having to let their exclusive games go multi-platform because there's not enough people playing Xbox to make it profitable. Sony will be there next generation if they don't do something quick. They're going to be in a position for having to make something like Final Fantasy 17 multi-platform because it's not going to make enough on PlayStation 5 alone. They might even do something weird like re-release all of the Final Fantasy 7 trilogy when it's all done on Xbox or platforms or PC or something to make some money back, because they're not making enough as it is right now, and it's only going to get worse. You're not going to get those other rest of people from PlayStation 4 jumping on to get a PlayStation 5 at this point. I don't see what you've got in the bag that would do that. And Concord definitely didn't do it. So, yes, I do feel sorry for people, and when people inevitably lose their jobs over it, that is sad. But I do think that it's a wake-up call for Sony, hopefully, that people don't like this live service bullshit that they've been peddling for years now, like it's some magic solution. I don't know where that came from. I don't know who made that decision, but I am glad that it's no longer a thing. But as I said, I should put a bit of an asterisk there, because I do think Concord's going to return in some sort of a form at some point, but I still don't think it's going to be enough to be successful. Like, however it returns, and whatever format takes, like there's many games that have done that. They've taken a dive and they've come back stronger, like Cyberpunk's one that did it, No Man's Sky's one that did it, but it would take a long time, a lot of effort, and a lot of stuff being given out for free, I think, for people to even give it a go. And it's still at the end of the day going to end up being a flop. It's still going to end up being a huge loss for Sony. Like, the amount of money they've spent in it, they're never going to recoup that back now. So if it does ever come back, it's still not going to suddenly be a success. It's still going to be seen as a huge flop and a failure. And the problem you have is, once something like is tarred with that reputation, people aren't going to want to go near it with a 10-foot pole. So when it does come back, yeah, you may get a few people on PlayStation Plus who get it because it's free, or however they bring it back. You might get a few people who already have a PlayStation having it and playing it, but it's not going to jump those people who haven't got a PlayStation 5 to get a PlayStation 5 to get it. It's just not going to do that. And I think that's what they were banking on. I don't know. But yeah, so I wouldn't say, I think people jump the gun saying, yeah, it's gone forever, it's been just, I don't think that's the case. But I also don't think ultimately, no matter what they do with it, they can really reverse what has already happened. Maybe they can, who knows, I don't know. But to me, it's not something that can really be fixed. It's not like, some games like that are good but just broken, and it would be good if it worked, but it doesn't work. This isn't even a good idea. It isn't even really a great idea. So I just think it won't really ever do what I don't think it can ever be considered a success. I might be wrong. I might be eating crow in like a couple of years' time, making a video saying that I was wrong. which I'm more than happy to do if that does indeed end up being the case. Anyway, I've talked for a long time about Concord and Sony and gone off on tangents about other stuff. So I'm going to stop this video now. I'll be back with another video very soon.